Your Cubase environment, very similar to other DAWs. You've got a pane where all the tracks show up, you've got a main workspace, and then a few other things built in. But let's first create an audio track so we can play around a bit better. You can double click here, but it's going to automatically create what you previously created. And if you haven't done anything yet, I think it's going to create a MIDI track. So I don't want that. Shift delete to delete that track. So right click, add audio track. If you right click on this track pane, you can see all the different types of tracks that you can create. And there's a lot of useful ones here. Different to right clicking in the workspace where it gives you the most common tools. So I'm going to add an audio track. Now that happened on the wrong window. And again, similar to creating those buses, you can see you can create different types of audio tracks. Here it becomes more important, but again, I'm going to create a mono track, and I can already choose various inputs that I've connected here. But I'm not going to, because I'm going to show you the other way of doing that. I can enter a name that I'm going to do. So let's call it Boom Mic and add the track. Now, you can drag open the track. You can add a track picture there. If you double click, I usually don't. But let's see if there is a picture that I want to use for this. Let us add that one over there. So that's my boom microphone. And I've realized I left it on built-in input, which doesn't include this mic. So let's quickly go and change my setting again. You can see it's very stable when you change drivers, which is quite useful. So now we're back on Sapphire. And now here is my main audio track that I've created. Now you'll see the inspector here. This is a very useful thing. It gives you a lot of controls for the track, and it's got these different panes that you can open and switch between. If you go to the very top pane, that gives you a duplicate of a few things like mute and solo, but over here it shows me the inputs that I can choose from. And this is that list that I mentioned. Only things show up here that you've created as buses in audio connections. So I've only created that. We had the stereo one and the extra NTG3. Choosing that here, and it also shows you where it goes, the stereo output, so that I can hear it again. And that is what I've selected. Let's quickly look at my mixer. I am not getting signal from my NTG3, so I obviously chose the wrong input. Let us fix that quickly. Inputs, it's not connected because I changed drivers there. So let's just connect 8.9 again. And when I go out, you can see there I've got some lowish levels coming through on this input track. So this is my boom mic track, and I'm going to create a second audio track just to show you. Second audio, can't type tonight. And whichever one you've got selected is record enabled by default. You can switch that off in preferences. I am going to do a quick recording to show you that it works. So it's enabled, and I am going to hit the big record button at the bottom there. You can see the shortcut is number pad asterisk, which when I hit, it is now recording the same boom microphone that you're busy hearing on a track here. And if I zoom in, you can see it's pretty good at updating this display in real time, which I like in terms of monitoring this visually while doing recordings. I'm going to hit stop, and there is my clip that we have recorded. Now, this gives us enough to explore the rest of this default setup that we have here. So let's first look at controls you have on the track, and then we're going to look at things you can do with a clip, and then we're going to look at all of these other options on the side in terms of your environment. But first, getting around, one of the nice features in Cubase, if you're working in a kind of mouse or trackpad workflow, if you click and drag down on the ruler, it zooms in very quickly, which is a nice way to move around in a project. Studio One does it in a similar way, and I find that very useful for quick zoom in. But I've actually stopped using that because if you hold in Command and scroll up and down, it zooms relative to where your cursor is. This is your mouse cursor, not your playback head in Cubase. So if I say have two different clips, you can see my cursor is here at the right one, hold in Command, and I scroll up and it zooms in right there. Now I have my cursor here and it zooms in right there. And zooming is quite a thing, especially for audio post-production. You have to zoom in and out of a lot of different tracks and projects, and you need to do that quite quickly to save time in your workflow. But the click and drag also works, and there's obviously also zoom controls in the bottom corner and some keyboard shortcuts for that too. Now, other things in the workspace is you can hold in Shift, and then scrolling up and down will scroll horizontally in your timeline here. Obviously, you can do that with other means. Now, on your track, it shows you a little squiggle there to show it's an audio track. You've got lots of different types of tracks. Mute, solo, pretty self-explanatory. Different to Pro Tools, you don't need to solo safe any tracks. It does it automatically. Cubase does not allow you to have feedback loops internally. And as you patch groups together, it is quite clever at doing this solo safe for you. And my record enable, monitoring. The moment I put the monitor on for the track, you can see my voice bouncing this level up and down. Now, I don't have my main speakers on, so I'm not getting feedback, but be aware of that if you're switching on a monitor in the same room of a mic and speakers, but it's not, that's how the default behavior. You only get meters over here if you've got the monitor enabled. This little mono sign, I'm skipping the E on purpose, that just shows you if this is a mono, stereo, or multi-channel track. And to show you the difference, let's quickly create a stereo track. And let's create, let's for fun create an ambisonics track. So you can see the different in pictures there. You can say first order for the ambisonics, the 2 dots there for stereo. You can't change that, that's not a button. It just shows you the type of track that you have. Automation, standard stuff here. Read automation is the green R, write automation is the red W, and that is when you want to use our control interface or actually change buttons on any of your plugins and read and write that automation. But more about automation later. I'm going to switch that off. Lanes, that is quite useful for overdubs. I use that for voiceover and narration recording. So say this was an audiobook I'm busy recording and I want the voiceover artist to redo this part. Rather than creating a new track, I switch on lanes. And then you see now when I hit record, it records in exactly the same space that I recorded previously, but it creates a new lane. I'm going to stop. And there's a comp tool where you can comp the best part of the take if it's music, or you can select what you want. If you switch off lanes, you'll see these different recordings are just clips that kind of overlap. The lanes also come in very useful when you do ADR recording innuendo. I'm going to delete that clip for now. So those are your basic buttons here. You can have track versions, which I haven't used in post-production, but if you've got music, you've got the same track and you've got a different version of it, that's where you manage it with this drop-down menu on the name. Now with a name, you can double-click and rename there, and also hit Tab to move through the tracks to rename them quite quickly. Last thing, you can right-click on the track and change a lot of stuff here, but I'm not going to go through any of this in this video. So that's our basic track controls for an audio track. Let's look at the workspace here. Now you'll notice there's grid lines that you can change, and also the ruler that we set earlier to time code, you can just right click on it and change it to something else. And this is also where you can make cycle markers or range selections. Like in Reaper, where you shift double click on a clip, on Cubase you select the clip and hit P, and then it gives you that range marker either for export purposes or for looping purposes. I'll get back to looping when we get to the transport bar. So that's your ruler, quite useful to see where you're at. The scroll bars are pretty standard in terms of your zoom. You can zoom in on your tracks all together. The behavior is quite nice. If you select more than one track and drag them open, they change size together, which is nice to get an ordered layout here. But you'll notice that there's a little control over there. That is the waveform height. Other DAWs have a similar way to do this. Yeah, you can set that with that slider if you've got very soft recordings to boost them so you can actually see the waveform.